These images you are seeing right now are not just another ordinary police dashcam video. They capture the exact moment when a normal life begins to fall apart. In just a few minutes, what seemed like a routine traffic stop turns into the starting point of one of the most shocking errors ever recorded, an error that would forever change the fate of a completely innocent couple. What no one could have imagined is that a simple bag of cotton candy, something meant to represent fun and innocence, would become the central piece of an absurd legal nightmare. From that moment on, logic vanished. Accusations emerged, decisions were made in haste, and almost unbelievably, a person with no criminal record ended up behind bars, facing 3 long months in jail and a surreal bail set at $1 million. Everything spiraled completely out of control. Meanwhile, the world kept turning outside. Time did not stop. Life went on without them. Moments that can never be recovered were lost forever. The devastating pain of a daughter forced to endure the unexpected loss of her pregnancy and her unborn twin grandchildren had to be faced in complete solitude, without the comfort, support, or embrace of the person who needed to be there the most in that cruel moment. Basic rights were stripped away as if they had never existed. And all of this began right there, on the side of the road. A quick procedure completed in seconds, a single result accepted without question, without verification, and without room for doubt was enough to seal the fate of that couple. But what if that result was completely wrong? What if what appeared to be undeniable proof was in reality a grotesque mistake? What if the truth behind this case is so absurd that it defies any notion of common sense? This is the story of how a flawed, cheap, and highly inaccurate technology, combined with a justice system that trusted it blindly, was able to destroy the life of an innocent woman and her entire family. Stay until the end to discover what really happened, because this story will shake everything you believe about justice, police evidence, and legal security. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and turn on notifications, because what you are about to see is not fiction, and it could happen to anyone. December 31st, 2016. While most people were preparing to celebrate the New Year's Eve, Dasha Fincher, then 43 years old, was going about an absolutely ordinary routine alongside her boyfriend. There was no rush, no tension, and no suspicion in the air. The couple left Monroe County, Georgia, heading toward the neighboring city of Macon, where they planned nothing more than a quick stop at a pawn shop. Nothing suggested that this simple drive would mark the beginning of one of the darkest chapters of their lives. The car was moving calmly along the road when within seconds something changed. A patrol vehicle from the Monroe County Police Department began following them, closely observing every movement. To the officers, one seemingly trivial detail stood out: the dark tint on the car's windows. What is common for many drivers was deemed sufficient to justify a traffic stop. After the vehicle was finally stopped on the shoulder, the officers conducted an initial inspection and quickly realized that the window tint was actually within the legal limits. In other words, the very reason used to justify the stop did not hold up. Even so, curiously, no ticket was issued and no citation related to the window tint was recorded. Even without the absence of any apparent violation, the officers took the next step. They asked for permission to search the car. Confident that there was nothing wrong and believing that cooperation would quickly bring the situation to an end, Dasha and her boyfriend, who was driving, agreed to the search, without imagining the devastating consequences that this single yes would bring. During the search, something seemingly insignificant caught the officer's attention. On the passenger side floorboard, in plain view, there was a transparent plastic bag. Inside was a bluish, fluffy substance with a slightly crystallized appearance, clearly the result of moisture and time. That alone was enough to completely change the tone of the encounter. The officers immediately picked up the bag, now visibly suspicious. Dasha tried to clarify the situation on the spot, calmly and objectively explaining exactly what it was: a simple bag of blue cotton candy forgotten from the night before. Having been exposed, the candy had absorbed moisture, partially hardened, and taken on that strange appearance. According to the court records themselves, the situation became even more absurd. One of the officers reportedly picked up the bag, smelled it, and acknowledged that it did indeed smell like cotton candy. Even so, despite the logical explanation, the distinctive smell, and the absence of any other evidence, the officers chose not to believe Dasha. For Dasha, there was no mystery at all. What was inside the plastic bag was simply cotton candy, a common treat bought for fun, forgotten inside the car, and altered by moisture. Nothing more than that. But for the police officers standing there on the side of the road, that same substance began to be seen in a completely different way. In their view, it could be methamphetamine, one of the drugs most commonly associated with serious crimes and immediate arrests. Determined to confirm their suspicion, the officers resorted to a rapid field drug test known as NARC-2. This type of kit is widely used by the Monroe County Police Department and by countless other law enforcement agencies throughout the United States. These tests are considered practical, fast, and extremely cheap, costing around $2 per unit. Precisely for that reason, they are applied directly at the scene, often without any additional verification. The test's operation is simple, almost rudimentary. The officer places a small sample of the suspected substance into a pouch containing chemical reagents. Then the packet is squeezed and they wait. If a specific color change occurs, the result is interpreted as an indication of the presence of a particular drug. For Dasha's case, the procedure was carried out right there on the roadside. The officers tore off a small piece of the blue cotton candy, placed the sample inside the chemical pouch, and activated the test. Just seconds later, what they saw was enough to seal a hasty decision. The pouch turned blue. To the officers, that meant only one thing. Without questioning, without complementary tests, and without any room for doubt, that result was treated as definitive confirmation of methamphetamine. From that moment on, Dasha's life stopped being seen as that of an ordinary citizen and began to be treated as that of a criminal. Dasha was completely stunned. The word methamphetamine echoed in her mind in an absurd, almost surreal way. None of it made sense. To her, the accusation was impossible, illogical, completely disconnected from reality. What was happening there simply could not be true. Desperate, Dasha tried to react. She begged the officers, asked them to redo the test, to check again, to look more carefully. She was absolutely certain that a gross mistake had been made. After all, it was cotton candy, something anyone could recognize. But her pleas were ignored. The officers refused to perform a new test or to question the result they had obtained. Based on a single field test, cheap and flawed, Dasha Fincher was handcuffed on the spot and arrested on extremely serious charges: methamphetamine trafficking and possession with intent to distribute. In a matter of minutes, her life was completely turned upside down. From an ordinary citizen, she was suddenly treated as a dangerous drug dealer, accused of one of the most harshly punished crimes in the judicial system. Shortly afterward came the final blow. A judge, blindly trusting the result of that preliminary test, made a devastating decision, setting bail at an amount that was simply impossible to pay, the absurd sum of $1 million. In practice, this was not a guarantee of appearing in court, it was a preemptive sentence of imprisonment. Faced with this reality, the system presented what many call an alternative, but which in truth becomes a cruel bargain. Defendants like Dasha, kept behind bars because they cannot afford bail, are forced to face an inhumane choice: plead guilty to a lesser charge, even while innocent, in order to regain their freedom quickly, or maintain their innocence and remain jailed for months or even years, waiting for a trial and proper laboratory testing that, ironically, could prove they never should have been arrested in the first place. Dasha made the hardest and most painful decision. She chose the most difficult path, refusing to confess to a crime she did not commit. She preferred to remain in jail rather than carry for the rest of her life the guilt of something she knew was not true. Without any financial means to meet the imposed amount, Dasha had no alternative. Handcuffed, she was taken to jail, where the system would leave her waiting, without any urgency at all, while her life collapsed on the outside. Dasha Fincher was now officially an inmate. Deprived of her freedom, separated from her family and from the life she had built, her identity was reduced to a case number, and the very system that had placed her behind bars showed no hurry whatsoever to determine whether it had made a devastating mistake. For Dasha, that was not the end. It was only the beginning of the nightmare. 3 months. That is how long she sat inside a cold jail cell, waiting for the Georgia Bureau of Investigation to finally conduct a proper analysis of the supposed seized material, the bag of cotton candy. 3 months of waiting, silence, and uncertainty. While Dasha remained locked away, her life on the outside fell apart. She was unable to be by her own daughter's side during the deep pain of a miscarriage, at a moment when her presence was needed more than ever. As if that were not enough, Dasha also faced serious medical emergencies while incarcerated. She suffered a broken hand and developed an ovarian cyst, yet was denied or neglected proper medical care. Each day became a psychological battle, a constant struggle against despair, anguish, and a profound sense of abandonment. And the cruelest part of all, during every one of those days, Dasha knew with absolute certainty that she was completely innocent. Even so, she remained in jail. For Dasha, only one hope remained, that at some point the system itself would be forced to acknowledge and correct the error it had committed. There was no other out. Her attorney then began a race against time and bureaucracy, relentlessly pushing for the supposed evidence to finally be sent to the state crime laboratory, where it could undergo definitive scientific testing based on technical criteria, not rushed assumptions. While the legal process advanced at a painfully slow, almost dragging pace, Dasha was forced to endure the daily horror of incarceration. Every day she woke up and fell asleep inside a cell, surrounded by bars, noise, and uncertainty. Her suffering was intensified by an even crueler detail. People from her own community, acquaintances who worked at the county jail, saw her in that condition every single day. She was not just another anonymous inmate in the system. To many, Dasha became labeled, reduced to a stigma, the methamphetamine girl. Humiliation became part of the punishment just as much as the loss of freedom. Stares, comments, and silent judgments became part of the routine. The psychological impact was deep and lasting. Day after day, Dasha had to fight not to lose hope, even knowing she was innocent and was paying the price for something she never did. Finally, in March 2017, after 3 long and agonizing months, the official results arrived. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation completed the laboratory analysis of the seized substance. The report was clear, direct, and indisputable. The blue substance, crystallized by moisture, contained no controlled substances. It was exactly what Dasha had said from the very first minute of that traffic stop. There were no drugs, there was no crime, it was simply blue cotton candy. Dasha's life was completely turned upside down because a cheap and imprecise chemical test was unable to distinguish an illegal drug from a common candy sold at children's parties. She was swallowed by a system that was not designed to prove her innocence, but rather to presume her guilt and move the process forward, no matter the cost. And the true villain of this story is not limited to just 2 individual police officers. The problem runs much deeper. The villain is the technology they blindly trusted. The NR2 field test, like many others used during police stops, is notoriously unreliable. These tests are widely known for producing false positives. They do not accurately identify a specific substance. Instead, they simply react to certain generic chemical structures that are present in a wide range of completely legal and harmless materials. A vast array of common substances can trigger these errors, from acne medications to household cleaning products and even everyday items like chocolate and sugar. What is most alarming is that the manufacturer of the test itself includes an explicit warning, clearly stating that the results are only presumptive and must be confirmed by an accredited laboratory. The United States Department of Justice issued similar guidelines more than 2 decades ago, warning about the risks associated with this type of testing. Even so, in practice, these warnings are often ignored. For the officer on the street, a simple color change becomes evidence. For the prosecutor, it becomes probable cause. And for people like Dasha, it can mean the loss of freedom, dignity, and months or even years of life that can never be recovered. A study published in 2024 by the University of Pennsylvania revealed alarming numbers that help illustrate the severity of this problem. According to the researchers, up to 30,000 innocent people may be arrested every year in the United States on drug possession charges based solely on these defective field tests. Even more frightening is the next figure. At least 100,000 people across the country end up pleading guilty to drug-related crimes after positive test results, not because they committed the crime, but because they see it as the only way to avoid spending months or years behind bars. In Dasha Fincher's case, the charges were eventually dropped, but not immediately. Even after the state crime laboratory officially confirmed her innocence, Dasha remained incarcerated for nearly 2 more weeks, as if the system felt no urgency to correct the mistake it had made. She was only released on April 4, 2017. The charges themselves were formally dismissed 2 weeks later. On the day she finally walked out of jail, Dasha did not leave unscathed. She had lost an irrecoverable part of her life. She was physically free, but the damage had already been done. The arrest record remained on her history, the psychological trauma endured. Distrust, fear, and a deep sense of injustice became part of her daily reality. Faced with this, Dasha Fincher chose not to remain silent. She fought back. She filed a federal lawsuit against Monroe County, against the 2 police officers responsible for her arrest, and against Surreal, the company that manufactures the NR2 test. The lawsuit alleged that the officers had not received proper training, that they acted recklessly and negligently, and that her civil rights had been seriously violated. However, the outcome of this legal battle brought little to no relief. In 2020, the case was dismissed. The court ruled against Dasha, and she received no compensation for the 3 months of freedom that had been unjustly taken from her. This outcome, although infuriating, is tragically common. Lawsuits against government entities are notoriously difficult to win. Likewise, other cases brought against the manufacturer of the NR2 test were also rejected. There was no accountability for the officers involved, the county, or the company that produces the test. Even after the case sparked public outrage, the Monroe County Sheriff's Department announced no official changes to its policy regarding the use of these tests. No apology was issued. No public review was presented. The system that failed Dasha remained intact, ready to fail the next person. The story of Dasha Fincher is a shocking and deeply disturbing example of what happens when the justice system places its trust in flawed technologies. These cheap and unreliable tests are not instruments of justice. They are, in practice, catalysts for injustice. A few jurisdictions have begun to respond. After devastating reports, cities like Houston drastically reduced the use of these tests. In some courts, judges have ruled that such exams are not scientifically reliable enough to even be presented to a grand jury. But these changes are still exceptions, not the rule. Across most of the country, the system continues to operate in the same way, sacrificing accuracy in the name of cost, speed, and convenience. And the people who pay the price are ordinary individuals, often innocent, who find themselves trapped in a system that is extremely difficult to escape. This story is not just about one woman and a bag of cotton candy. It is about thousands of lives destroyed every year by wrongful arrests. It is about a system in which pleading guilty can seem like the only rational choice, even when you know you committed no crime at all. And it raises an unavoidable question. What would you do if you were in that car? If your freedom depended on a $2 test capable of turning your life upside down in a matter of seconds? The fight for a fairer justice system is long, difficult, and necessary. If you believe stories like this need to be told, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and follow for more content about the pursuit of justice and the cases that demand our attention.